Hey babe, welcome to Baseball for Girls, where baseball meets soft girl energy. I'm Shaughnessy, and here we do baseball with heart, humanity, and a little humor. So, whether you're brand new to the game or deep in your baseball era, you're in the right place. So grab something cozy and settle in, and let's get into today's episode. Let's play ball. Hey babes, welcome back to another episode of Baseball for Girls. Today I'm going to give a quick recap of my experience at the SABR 54 conference. So SABR is the Society for American Baseball Research. They have an annual conference every year around this time, so mid to late summer. And this year, I decided to go just because I had been looking at ways to get more involved with baseball. As you might know, I really created this podcast so that I could have an outlet to talk about baseball because none of my friends watch baseball. No one in my family really watches baseball. So I never really have anyone to talk about it with. So I thought that going to the SABR conference would be such a great opportunity to make new friends and just really be able to surround myself with people who also love baseball as much as I do. So SABR has this conference as well as a more analytical conference where they really talk about the statistics and analytics of baseball. But this conference was mostly focused on research and the different research opportunities and research topics that people had been conducting. There were so many different interesting research topics that were presented at the conference. But today, I really am just going to focus on my overall experience at SABR, starting with my very first day. So the conference was July 29th through August 2nd. So it really ended on Saturday night. So on the very first day, I arrived in Cleveland. So the conference was held in Cleveland, Ohio. I arrived in Cleveland. I came to the Hilton Hotel where the conference was being held. So I stayed in the hotel where the conference was being taken place. I went to the registration table, and honestly, I felt really nervous and intimidated. Like I said, I don't really know anyone that likes baseball, so clearly I went into this conference not knowing anyone, and I didn't actually sign up for the full SABR membership. So on the SABR website, you can become an actual member of SABR, and I didn't do that, so I didn't have access to the directory or just like the different opportunities that you could have made to talk to people beforehand. So I completely went into the conference blind, but honestly, that's like my entire life. I love doing things like that. So when I first arrived, I was definitely pretty intimidated. I am a Black woman, and I'm pretty sure I was the only Black woman there. And so I felt pretty out of place at first, but I did end up meeting a lot more women, and so that was really helpful. The women there were so kind to me and really helped to make me feel really included, so that made me feel more at ease. But the very first day, I didn't meet any women. It was all just very old white men, and so I went back to my hotel room and I kind of questioned all my life decisions. But I didn't leave. I just stayed in my hotel room for the evening. So Wednesday night was kind of just like the arrival day. So I just like ordered Uber Eats and I ate dinner in my hotel room. And I just kind of tried to mentally prepare myself for the next day. So the very first real day of the conference was Thursday, July 30th. And the very first thing was at 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. where it was a first time conference attendee kind of meet and greet thing. I definitely struggled to wake up super early. So I got there around 7:30 because at 7:30 they were going to give like kind of a rundown of how the conference works and like the best ways to navigate the conference. And like I said, I did get there a little bit late, so I kind of got the tail end of it, but that was just like a few minutes of a presentation, and then the rest was more or less the meet and greet. So then I just made more friends. That's where I was able to meet women that were at the conference and a lot of women that were in leadership positions within SABR. So that was also really empowering. I was informed about the Women in Baseball Committee meeting that was happening that day. And so I definitely went to that. But that first meet and greet is where I met most of the friends that I kept throughout the conference. So that was really fun and definitely a lot more encouraging. So during the conference, a lot of different committees were meeting. So SABR has a bunch of different committees that each do their own kinds of research. So really the goal for a first-time attendee / first-time member is to go to some committee meetings and try to choose a committee to be on. So I went to a couple of different committee meetings. I went to the Women in Baseball committee meeting. I went to one on official scoring, so how you score baseball games. I went to one about minor leagues, so like getting an understanding of how the minor league system works. And I went to one that was on games and simulations, which I thought was pretty interesting just because I'd never heard of playing baseball as a board game or like a card game. So that was really interesting. But I do think that my favorite committee was official scoring. So basically talking about the best way to score games, but also researching different methods of how people keep up with scoring games. So during this committee meeting, they had 3 people on a panel that were official scorers for an MLB team. So like I mentioned, the conference was held in Cleveland. So the Cleveland Guardians were like the host stadium or host team. So it was official scorers from the Cleveland Guardians and like a minor league official scorer as well from the Cleveland Guardians organization. So I just thought that was really interesting, and I'd love to get more involved in being behind the scenes with official scoring. Honestly, it sounded a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, but I still think it was really interesting. And of course, I probably will join the Women in Baseball Committee. They were talking about doing more research with women in baseball and maybe writing a book about women in baseball, which was one of their kind of goals for that meeting. So there was just a bunch of different committees that were really interesting. That there were a couple that I missed that I wanted to go to just because there were just so many options. And sometimes I would just end up talking to people and miss a session. So it was really fun. I had a really good time learning about the different committees and meeting all the different people that are so deeply involved with baseball and with SABR. But on that first day, we had the Cleveland History Bus Tour, which gave a behind-the-scenes bus tour of Cleveland's baseball history. We went to a couple of different places throughout Cleveland that had some significant baseball history, but the main attraction was League Park, which had the Baseball Heritage Museum for Cleveland. It was really cool. It was like this medium-sized museum that had a bunch of different memorabilia from lots of different baseball eras, like going back into the early 1900s. So that was super cool. And then the next day, the coolest session, I think, was the panel for the 1990s Cleveland Indians. So the Cleveland Guardians used to be called the Indians until they had a name change, I guess maybe about 5 years ago. So at the time, they were called the Cleveland Indians, and they had a bunch of the guys from that era that did really well, and Cleveland didn't win a World Series during that decade. The only time they've won a World Series, I believe, was in 1948. So the players that they interviewed were talking about how close they got to winning a World Series. They gave some of their really fun and interesting stories. People were able to ask them questions about their time with Cleveland, and it was so interesting, and people really enjoyed it, I think, just because those guys were so funny and they really had such bright personalities, and it really made everyone feel super connected to their story. And even though I wasn't watching baseball in the 1990s, I feel like I got a really good understanding and history of Cleveland baseball during that time. And then later that day, so this was Friday, SABR attendees went to the Cleveland Guardians game. So the Guardians were playing the Diamondbacks on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for their 3-game series. Unfortunately, the Guardians did lose Friday and Saturday. I'm recording this before the final game of the series, so we'll have to see if Cleveland is able to at least get one game from the Diamondbacks, but we'll just have to wait and see. But it was so fun to go and see the Guardians in person at their stadium. I'd never been to the Guardians stadium, so that was so fun. Their stadium is called Progressive Field. So, like I mentioned, I went to the committee for official scoring, and during that committee, I asked one of the panelists questions about scoring, and we got into a really good conversation about it, and he ended up inviting me to the press box during the game because he was in charge of the pitch clock for the game. So he invited me and a couple other people up to the press box, and we were able to sit and watch the entire game from the press box, which was so cool. I thought that he was just inviting us to just look at the press box and then we would have to, go back to our seats. But he was like, oh no, y'all can sit right here. And so we sat in the press box and watched the game from such a cool angle. But the SABR conference did have a section that we were supposed to sit in. So when we first got to the stadium, SABR had set up an area for us to eat. So it was kind of like an outdoor seating area where we could get food and everything. I made it to that area, but by the time I was getting in line to get food, the person who invited me to the press box was like, okay, it's time to go. And so I wasn't able to actually eat at the ballpark. I had to go to the press box. And so I didn't get the full experience with SABR at the game, unfortunately, but I obviously had such a good time sitting in the press box for the Cleveland Guardians. I was sitting near the person who does the ABS challenges that you see on the screen, as well as the person who actually puts up on the screen when it's a ball or a strike. So cool. Obviously there were media people there as well. That was by far the coolest experience ever. After the game, they had fireworks. So I went down to the area where I was supposed to sit and I watched the fireworks. And then I went back to the hotel. And then for the last day of the SABR conference, by then I'd made so many friends. I kind of missed a lot of the sessions on Saturday just because I ended up talking with people and hanging out with people. So even though I did miss some of those Saturday meetings, I still feel like I gained so much from the SABR conference just from finally making some new baseball friends. There were a couple of really cool poster presentations that I was able to see, and maybe I'll do a separate episode where I kind of talk about some of those research posters, but I won't really get into that today. And then later on Saturday, the Women's Professional Baseball League had their first ever game. So not like women's softball, but actually women's baseball. They had their very first game on August 1st. So that was going to be live streamed from the SABR conference from 5 to 7 p.m. And me and some friends that I made, we were like, okay, maybe we can watch the live stream from 5 to 7 and then go to the Guardians game that started at 7:15 and just be a little bit late to the Guardians game. However, the women's game ended up getting rained out, so the game was delayed for about an hour and 15 minutes, I believe. And so we ended up just going to the Guardians game instead. So I didn't get a chance to watch the Women's Professional Baseball League game with the rest of the SABR conference, but I did go back to another Guardians game just because I wanted to see the game from a regular person's point of view. And I'm really glad that I did. I had such a fun time again at the Guardians game, and I figured I'd have to watch the women's baseball game on a live stream anyway, but I'm not going to be in Cleveland again anytime soon. So I ended up prioritizing going to that game. But that did mean that I ended up missing the closing ceremonies for the conference, which I kind of forgot about when I ordered the tickets for the Guardians game. But I really did enjoy the entire conference. I do wish that I was able to go to the closing ceremonies, but I'll definitely be going to another SABR conference next year and joining SABR to become a committee member and staying in contact with the people and the friends that I made at the conference. So that was my experience at SABR 54, so the Society for American Baseball Research. I had such a good time. I'll definitely be going again, and y'all should definitely check them out. They have catalogs of all different types of baseball research. They also have a YouTube channel, I believe, as well. So they have videos like oral histories from baseball players as well. So it's just a really cool opportunity to learn more about baseball and baseball's rich history. So that's all that I have for you guys today. Unfortunately, I will not be able to do a recap this week. I will be traveling to Kansas City this week and going to a Kansas City Royals game. I leave today, which is Sunday, so I'll be going to visit a friend in Kansas City and staying there, so I won't be able to properly record for a podcast, but I will definitely have an episode for you the second week of August, and we will go through all the new trades that are happening. Well, just this morning, Tarek Skubal was traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers. I think that's probably going to be the biggest trade that people are going to be talking about for at least the next couple of hours until the next big trade happens, but that's the one that people were talking about the most, and it actually happened. So I'll definitely let you know in the next episode if there are any more super high profile trades that happened. Thank you so much for joining me here in the softest corner of sports media, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Oh my gosh, wait. So, well, hey babes, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Baseball for Girls. I probably forgot to plug the things that I'm doing, including my Instagram. So I just wanted to come back here and plug all my little things really quick. So my Instagram is baseball4girls_. And I just kind of post on there whenever I upload a new episode. I also have a baseball score tracker. It has about 40 weeks in it, and it has like some notes, sections, so that you can also keep track of games throughout the week. I use it for Major League Baseball games, but you can also use it for minor league games, your kids' games, your friends that are playing baseball, whatever. It's really just a nice way to keep track of all the games and the scores from each game, especially since baseball is typically played in series. So you should check that out. It's just called Baseball Score Log, and it can be found on Amazon, and it's only $9.99. I also include how I personally keep track of games as a little bit of an instruction guide on the first couple of pages, so you can keep score like the same way that I do. Also, I am in the process of writing a ebook. So it'll be a Baseball for Beginners ebook that I have been working on for the past couple of weeks. It'll just kind of walk through the rules of the game, how to watch it for the first time, and just give you a general idea for how to understand baseball from a very, very basic perspective. So I'll definitely let y'all know whenever that is available. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch y'all next time. Bye.